Hello, my name is Joe Burns, and today I'm going to be taking you inside the mind of a hacker. By that, what I mean is I am a certified ethical hacker. I help businesses and individuals to understand what the threats and vulnerabilities are within their organizations and help to identify those and mitigate against them. As such, as a certified ethical hacker, it's really important that I understand all the tools and techniques that cyber criminals are using to gain access to information. And today I kind of want to take you on a bit of a journey through some of those tools and techniques. Mainly the simple ones, to be honest, not the complicated techniques that are used, but simple techniques that hackers can use to steal information. So I like to call this hacking for dummies. Because by the end of this session, there'll be no doubt things that you now realize are so incredibly simple for anybody to do, and that's what we're defending against. Not necessarily the ultra complex attacks, but the simple things that can be done. The first one is the classic phishing email. So probably the most well-known technique that is used by cyber criminals, and it's one of their favorites. They can do it from anywhere, and quite often it has high success rates. So a phishing email like this example, so we've got a simple WeTransfer phishing email here. What you'll notice is that when you look at the email addresses and the links, even though it says WeTransfer, the actual links themselves say VVE transfer. That's a common technique that cyber criminals will use, is that they will change and manipulate some of the characters so that they can send their links and they still work, but they are using character replacement or characters that look similar to one another. So sometimes it could be a 0 instead of a no. So the phishing email is the classic way for cyber criminals to gain access to information. Usually they're trying to put pressure on, so they'll explain that there's some sort of urgency in the email. And the other thing is, it's not always going to be links. What we've seen more recently is techniques where a criminal will break into somebody's actual email account and find a genuine invoice and then start manipulating and changing the bank details on that invoice and sending it into an accounts department, so that it's becoming really difficult to spot now, especially when the criminal has some sort of inside access. Things to do with phishing email is, if you receive an email or even a text message is a common technique now, but if you receive an email and you aren't expecting it, even if it came from somebody who you know, then just pick up the phone, give them a call and say, I've just had this email, seems to be out of character, or I wasn't really expecting it. Is this genuinely from you? That extra step could actually save you from becoming a victim to a serious financial crime. What about when you're out and about in pubs, bars, cafes, hotels? It's really common to see people, get tablets out, laptops, and mobile phones, and connect to public Wi-Fi, public hotspots. But I want to show you a technique today that uses a device called a Wi-Fi pineapple. That's a device like this, and that's about $100 you can buy it for online. And this device can basically mimic any Wi-Fi network. So if you were at a Starbucks, your phone or your computer will constantly be calling out saying, Starbucks Wi-Fi, are you there? And my device can answer yes to pretty much anything. So it doesn't matter what you're trying to connect to. My device can make you connect to it over a Wi-Fi network connection. And where this can be quite powerful for the cyber criminals is that they can pretend to be any portal they want and present any portal they want. And I'm going to show a video demonstration here using the Wi-Fi pineapple device that I've got. And obviously for my demo, I'm using Premier Inn, but I call the Wi-Fi network Joe the Hacker demo, just so people don't accidentally connect to it. And you can see that the portal that appears is looks genuinely like a Premier Inn Wi-Fi portal, because I cloned their exact one. And here you could connect to the ultimate Wi-Fi and put in your your credit card information, and I will have captured that on that device to then go in and read in plain text. That could also be usernames and passwords for things. So it's really crucial that when you do, if you need to connect to public Wi-Fi, that you're really careful about what information you put in. Generally, I advise people not to connect to public Wi-Fi anyway because of the potential risks of who else is on that network and also potential risks like this. So use your 4G data if you can instead. But yeah, be mindful of public Wi-Fi. Another little tool that the hackers have in their toolkit is this device. It's called a rubber ducky. And a rubber ducky, although it looks like a USB pen drive that many of you will have seen before or have in your possession, it actually isn't. It's a keyboard. And I know it doesn't look like a keyboard, but the idea is that the criminals, the hackers, can script or program that device to basically inject keyboard strokes into a computer. Best thing to do is probably show you a video example of how powerful this can be in our case with stealing Google Chrome passwords. So one thing to note is if you are storing passwords in Google Chrome, please stop, remove them and switch off the functionality. You can see here I've got some, not real passwords, these are just for a demo, but I've stored some usernames and passwords in my Google Chrome. I'm just showing you that they exist in here. As I say, it's really important to turn off the feature in Google Chrome to save passwords. See, that is on at the moment. If you flick it to grey, it's off. And you can also remove these passwords from within Google Chrome if you've already saved them, which, as I say, I would advise to do. The reason is that it's incredibly easy, as you're about to see, to pull those passwords, those usernames and passwords, out of Google Chrome and send them to the criminal. So here I've got the rubber ducky device, and this is a Surface laptop and my mobile phone with no passwords currently listed on it. Surface laptop with full latest security updates on at the time of the video. I've plugged the device in and watch how quickly this runs. That's it, done. In that time, only a few seconds, I think it's less than 5 seconds total. In that time, it's pulled all of the passwords from Google Chrome, decrypted them and sent them off to my remote server, which I can then use my mobile phone to quickly have a look on and see if I've captured any information. Sure enough, all the usernames and passwords that were stored in Google Chrome are now available for me to see on my mobile. So that's how simple it can be for criminal hackers to steal passwords straight out of Google Chrome using that rubber ducky device. So key thing is never pick up a random USB pen drive that might be lying about somewhere and plug it in. Yeah, it's so easy for criminals to use that. Have you ever seen this kind of scene on a train before, or a CAF? It's a bit of a bugbear for me. When I get on a train, I travel back and forth from London quite a bit, and when I get on a train, particularly in first class, and you see somebody bring their laptop on and they open up their lid, and I know within 30 seconds to a minute they're probably going to be typing in their password into the system. They may also open up like web portals and webmail and different like systems and start putting the username and passwords into those as well. Now, if they're only a few meters away from me, and everybody's got high definition camera in their pocket on their mobile phone, some of them have super slow-mo functionality now as well, so you could literally be pointing the camera at somebody's screen and keyboard and hit record and go back and frame by frame reveal the password and just watch them type the password in. Also, if there's sensitive information on the actual screen, that can be captured quite easily. It could be personal data. So it's really crucial to kind of be aware of your surroundings, and if you do need to work when you're on a train, do a visible check around. And also you can get privacy glass type covers for laptop screens so that you can't actually see the contents of the screen if you're at a slight angle, which is also worth using if you are going to be traveling a lot or you're out and about in public spaces. But it might be quite obvious for people that shoulder surfing can happen in small confined spaces like this, but you might not be aware from how far away people can actually be shoulder surfing and watching what you're doing. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story. This was the scene from my wife and I being on holiday in Manhattan, New York. This was a rooftop bar we were sat at, looking out over the skyline, and we're having a nice evening with drinks. I think she's sipping a margarita at the time, and I'm looking out at Manhattan and going, I've got a powerful zoom camera. I wonder if I could see into any of those offices across the way with it. So I say to the missus, right, I'm just going to nip to the room and grab my zoom camera. To which she's like, oh God, here we go again. Anyway, come back up. It's a Nikon Coolpix P900. Looks like this. And this kind of sets the scene a little bit. Pointed the camera in that general direction. And then I started to zoom in. And I zoomed in a bit more, and a bit more, and a bit further. And you can clearly see the guy's gone to Starbucks a couple of times for his coffee fix, and see his 2 screens open, and with Outlook on one of them, and a list of his emails and that have come in, and he's walked away from his desk. But he did eventually come back, sat back down his desk, and I think he was doing a financial report to the board or something. It's kind of what it looked like. But look at that. That is long distance shoulder surfing. Pretty scary stuff. Just for context, that's how far away we were from that office. So yeah, it just goes to show that shoulder surfing doesn't mean somebody stood right behind you. And bear in mind that some of the modern mobile phones that are being released nowadays have even got these super zooms, like space zooms, where you can see the craters on the moon, a bit like you can with this camera. So it's quite probable that there's going to be a lot of people with a super powerful camera in their pocket in no time, and then this potential of data theft from a distance is very easy for anybody, really. The other thing that lazy hackers could do is if they couldn't be bothered to phish somebody or steal the username and password any other way, you can just go onto the dark web and you can basically pay for either a Netflix, PayPal account, or an email address and password that's been stolen in another data breach. In fact, there's billions of these usernames and passwords stored on the dark web, and although kind of this gives you an idea that you can pay for them, if you clear it up enough, you can find these lists for free on torrent sites and things. So most people don't pay for these lists; they just download them. And the problem with that is if there's been data breaches that have happened before with usernames and passwords on, and I can get my hands on a big list of known usernames and passwords from from previous data breaches, then I could start to use that username and password and try and sign into other things that you may have. So I could, and bearing in mind that the criminals don't do this by hand. They don't get thousands and thousands of usernames and passwords and then start trying to type them on every application. Well, they have automated tools and scripts that do that for them, so that they ultimately end up with a traffic light system of this username and password combination on this particular website works. Let's say that's Microsoft 365 or Google or Amazon or whatever. So they then have a curated list of working usernames and passwords that they can just log in and take control of accounts. One of the things as well, the gold mine for a hacker is somebody's email account. Because think about it, if I get access to somebody's email account and you've got various other accounts with other different suppliers, portals and vendors, then I could just hit forgot my password on a load of websites that I know you've got because you've had emails from them in your inbox. When I hit forgot my password, it sends an email link. I can click that link, reset the password, gives me access to other things. So bear in mind, you need to keep your email account specifically, as well as everything else, but that is the hacker's gold mine. They are going to target email accounts because it's a great way of escalating the attack. I can then start to influence other people and send emails from you to other people, which could be even more damaging. So yeah, just bear that in mind. If you want to have a look if your details have been in any data breaches, then this is a resource you can use, haveibeenpwned.com. If you don't want to put your email address in because I don't trust them, this is a recommended site from a lot of security experts, but I get the need for no trust. So you can just click on the passwords header and you can type a password in that you use at the moment, and it will tell you whether that password is stored in any of these data breach lists. And even if it wasn't stolen from you using it, then I would suggest stop using that password, because it's been stolen before, even if it's somebody else's password as well, which suggests it's not secure enough. So make sure that you change that one as well. So what do we do to mitigate the risk of some of these factors and help keep your cybersecurity defense in check? Well, when it comes to cybersecurity, it's a little bit like securing a building or a house. It takes layers of defense. It's not just one thing. There's no silver bullet. So a bit like a building, the first thing you do when you leave is you leave your house in the morning, you lock your door. But you might also have a burglar alarm. You may have CCTV cameras as well. If you've got a lot of valuables in the house, you may also have a safe, and you keep all your jewelry and your watches and stuff in a safe when you're not around. So that's kind of the same approach as having lots of layers to keep your valuables safe. And same thing that applies to IT security. So we want to make it as difficult as possible for the criminals to get in. We want them to basically have to use too much exhaustive energy on your particular organization, so they just move on to somebody that's not got a decent burglar alarm and CCTV. So that's what you're trying to achieve, put lots of layers of defense in. So let's cover some of the basics. Again, this is stuff that everybody should be doing, everyone should know, and we're not going on to really diverse techniques. We're just talking about the simple basics at the minute. So firstly, you may remember from the NHS ransomware attack a few years ago, one of the things that their Achilles heel was that they weren't keeping their systems updated. And so the vulnerability that was exploited to gain access to all of their systems through the ransomware was something that was actually fixed by Microsoft months earlier, but it hadn't been updated within the NHS. So just to kind of point out why security updates are really important, to do them quickly after they're released. So when it comes to a security update that's been a bug that's been found, should I say, so there's a vulnerability that exists in a piece of software, a bug, and a security researcher, an ethical hacker may have found this problem and reported it to the vendor. Could be Microsoft or Google or whatever. But let's say there's a problem with Google Chrome and there's a bug that allows people to steal data from Google Chrome. Google will then release a patch or an update, a security update, to fix that particular problem. And when they do that and they release that update, they will put a description of the problem that it solves and how it solves it, not in too much technical detail, but it will basically say there was a vulnerability that existed and this will fix it. Now what all the hackers do is they look at that and go, oh, there was a bug there that I could potentially exploit. They've now fixed it in an update, but let's reverse engineer the update and find out what it's doing or what it's fixed. And then once they've found out what the problem was, they can then exploit that problem. So now you see the situation is from the day of before the day of update, probably very few people knew that bug existed. After the update, every hacker in the world now knows that there was a problem, and for any systems that aren't updated, they know that they can still exploit it. So it puts you at much greater risk, because the longer you leave the update, the more chance that hackers are going to try and attempt to break into that vulnerability on your systems. It's really key to get security updates done as soon as they're released or as quickly as possible after testing. So I'm also going to cover passwords. Passwords are a bit of a backbone to security, although they are generally one of the weakest links as well. So I want to try and encourage people to choose good passwords, and emphasis on the S of passwords. You shouldn't have a single password. You need to have multiple passwords. In fact, every single password needs to be completely unique. So you should also be choosing a password with a combination of uppercase, lowercase letters, numbers and symbols to make it as complex as possible and as difficult as possible for a computer to try and brute force, basically guess the password by trying lots and lots of different combinations. So a brute force, just to give you an idea, it's a bit like having a 4-digit keypad on a burglar alarm, and somebody turns up and tries 4 zeros, then 3 zeros 1, 3 zeros 2, and keeps going until you get to 4 nines. That is how brute force works for passwords. So the longer the password is and the more characters or different types of characters, the more difficult it is for those combinations of passwords to be found out. So that's why you should use complex characters. And all passwords should be at least 15 characters, or longer, really, if you can. The longer the better, generally. So an easy way of creating unique passwords that are easy to remember is by using a password manager. So there's, for example, LastPass and Bitwarden, although I'm currently using Bitwarden, which I'm quite happy with as a solution, but there are plenty of password managers, and it's about finding the right one for you. The benefit of a password manager is it can create you random, complex, and unique passwords for everything. As you go to set an account up on a website, it can basically generate a password for you on the fly that you're not thinking of. You're not having to think of and remember, because it stores it for you. And I know I mentioned about the Google Chrome vulnerability a little bit earlier on. The password manager is generally more secure than a built-in browser password store, because it uses encryption that you then have to unlock within the browser as well. So it isn't just that the password is stored along with the web browser and your user account as it is with Google Chrome. So it's a much safer way of storing your password, but it is really important to keep your password manager really secure. So we're going to touch on 2FA in a bit, but you need to make sure you've got multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication on your password manager as well. So that's the easy way, and I'd suggest doing. You can also have a mobile app and stuff as well that makes it easy for setting passwords up and using passwords on your mobile. But if you didn't want to use a password manager, or you wanted to remember your passwords as well as storing them in a password manager, this technique is something that I've been teaching people for years. It's to create a password formula. So basically we start with a base password, something that's already pretty complex. And if you want to start with something you can remember, that's easy to remember and already quite complex, an idea is an address, maybe a memorable address from when you grew up. In this example, we're using 22 Park Lane and then the postcode, just a random address. But you can see that it's already got numbers, uppercase and lowercase letters, and it's also pretty complex because the postcode it's a bit of a random mix of characters, but it's still not unique. So we've got a base password, but each one is the same at the minute, and we need them all to be unique. So what we could do is we could add some characters from the website or application that we're using and make them part of the password. So Amazon could have the A and N. So we're using the first and the last letter of each of the words. So Amazon, we put the A and the N around the password, Office 365, the O and the 5, and then Facebook, the F and the K. And then just for good measure, we're sticking an exclamation point or a symbol on the end of it, just to make it more complex. And then we've got unique passwords for each application, meaning if a hacker steals one of them and tries to automatically log into other accounts that you might have, it's going to fail because the password is not the same. So hopefully that's a useful tip for anybody that does want to have memorable passwords that are all unique and complex. The other thing, and this is the way that the world is going more towards, thankfully, because passwords are such a flaw in IT security at the moment, because generally people don't have good, strong passwords that are unique. It's nice to get to passwordless. So this is what I do on my Microsoft 365 account, and I think Google have got the same capability as well. And I think Microsoft, for their personal accounts, are enforcing passwordless logins going forwards as well. So the difference with this is when you put your username in on an application or website, instead of it asking you then for a password, it pushes a number to your phone on a mobile app. It shows you one of the numbers on screen, and it just gets you to kind of match those two numbers, and then it signs you in. This is good because if somebody was looking at your computer over your shoulder, or if somebody's got a keylogger on a computer or something like that, it's quite an easy way to steal the password as you type it in. So this prevents that and means that if you're in a public place, it's a much safer way of logging in. As mentioned a second ago, and to stress that this is probably the one thing that I would like you to take from this talk. If you forget everything else, just make sure that you action this step. Two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication is becoming more common. I think certain vendors are making it compulsory for things, but not everyone. So one of the things I must stress today is make sure you have more two-factor authentication or two-factor authentication enabled on every single account you have. So that's social media profiles, it's Amazon, PayPal, eBay, your work stuff. So if it's 365 or Google, make sure that you've got two-factor authentication on everything that you use. Set aside a bit of time, put some time in your diary, and just go review two-factor authentication and go log into all of your common accounts, the things that you have, and switch on 2FA. It's so critical. Now, this is going to be the biggest single step you can take to prevent hackers from easily gaining access to your accounts. The one thing I will say though is it won't eliminate it completely. Obviously, an ethical hacker, I'm looking at defenses and things that we put in place to stop hackers from getting in, and I'm always looking for ways to get around those and to still provide a successful attack, because this is what the criminals do. So I basically created a very advanced phishing email and campaign where I actually even bought the domain linked-in.uk just so that when I send the link, it looks even more believable. Obviously, this is all in a test environment. It's not done on real people. But to go through this, I sent an email that said, you've turned off two-factor authentication. Please make sure you go on and set it up. Now with this, when they click on the link, it's quite common for cyber criminals to basically present a cloned page. Basically, they'll go onto an existing website like LinkedIn and they'll copy that page and then host it on their own web server, and it will look exactly the same, but it will be in a completely different place. The problem with that is if somebody has two-factor authentication enabled, even by stealing the username and password, the criminal won't be able to get into the account because they'll be prompted for two-factor authentication. In this particular technique, what you're actually seeing when I click the link is LinkedIn. It's not a cloned page, it's actually LinkedIn's website. The way that this works is, and this is the most advanced and technical out of all these demonstrations, so just bear with me on this one. But what it's actually doing is I'm providing, my computer is proxying to LinkedIn. So I'm sat in between you and the web browser, the actual LinkedIn website, and I'm able to see everything that goes back and forth. So when somebody goes in to sign on to LinkedIn after clicking my link, I actually capture the username and password, which is great, but in this account, it's got two-factor authentication enabled on it. So if I tried to log in, I wouldn't be successful. And a lot of people think that these 2FA bypass techniques rely on the code, like stealing the 2FA code, but that wouldn't really be possible because the codes change so frequently, so they expire by the time I'd be able to use them. And they also, as soon as they're used, it would expire in the case of a text code as well. So with this one, they're putting the two-factor authentication code in, so they become, so they essentially sign in to LinkedIn. Now, you may be familiar with the fact that if you log into LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or anything like that on a computer or a device, you'll notice that you'll stay signed in for days or weeks potentially at a time. It won't ask you again the next time you come into your computer tomorrow for username and password again, because it has a session. It establishes a session, and depending on the website, it will give you maybe days or weeks without having to re-log in. Now, this is the thing we're going to take advantage of. So my computer that sat in between LinkedIn and the victim can then steal that session as it gets sent back to the user. And in this case, I've redirected them to somewhere completely different on LinkedIn. They're not actually signed in at all. And I've now stolen what is their session cookie, a little file that gets dropped onto the computer to say it's already been authenticated. So I've got that information. Again, it looks a bit techy, but the white text on the right is that session cookie information. And I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it into my web browser. Now, as soon as I do that, I don't need to put two-factor authentication in, because LinkedIn then thinks that I am the person who signed in. So I've essentially hijacked their session and I am now them. Without needing any two-factor authentication code, I didn't even actually need to know the username and password either, because my browser just assumes that I am that person and lets me straight onto LinkedIn. And even though it looks complicated, that actual technique in terms of start to finish to get it all set up so I can start stealing information, stealing sessions, only takes about 15 minutes to get set up and actually start sending emails out that could fool people into giving that information away. So again, just go to show that You still need cyber awareness education. You still need training for your end users, because anybody that falls victim to a phishing email, even when they've got multi-factor authentication on, could still lead to a pretty dangerous breach. Another thing just to kind of briefly cover, if you ever see HTTPS on websites, that means that the data that you're submitting on that site, so email address, passwords, credit card information, it means that data is encrypted so that anybody else on the network won't be able to see it as it's being communicated. But it doesn't provide authenticity to the website. So you can see on this one, the Argos website isn't actually Argos, it's ARG0S. So even if you see a padlock and HTTPS, criminals use HTTPS too. So it doesn't mean that the website you're on is verified. It just means that the data is encrypted. It's just something to bear in mind. So what are the key things to remember then from this talk? Well, firstly, choose strong, complex passwords, which are unique for every application. Enable multi-factor authentication on everything. As I say, please do that. Keep software devices updated as quickly as possible. Don't plug in random USB devices that are unknown to you. Use a password manager for better storage and complexity of your passwords and to help you have unique passwords for each one. Be suspicious about email or any other digital messages, so text messages and even WhatsApp messages. People can use that as a way of phishing people as well. And be aware of your surroundings. So who's around you, can people see your screen and your keyboard. Hope that that's been of use to you all today. My name's Joe Burns. If you want to connect to me on LinkedIn, you can scan the QR code that's currently on screen, and you can find out more about me and what I do on joethehacker.com. Thank you very much for listening to me today, and please get in touch if you've got any questions. Thanks a lot.